So today I'm continuing with the White Forest content, and I want to show you Snake Eyes Azamina White Forest. This is a deck that is actually being played in the OCG right now, and it is somewhat popular. It's probably the most popular of the White Forest variants, I think overtaking Runic, which was probably more popular before, at least in the TCG. I think that this is going to be very relevant in the TCG when it comes out, pending whatever happens on a ban list. Now, the reason that you would play these cards together is there's more synergy than you'd expect if you're not familiar with these cards. So everyone knows what the Snake Eyes stuff does, but Azamina LZ of the White Forest is kind of the bridge between every single engine. It bridges your White Forest stuff, it bridges your Azamina stuff, and it also bridges your Snake Eyes stuff. So this card, you can reveal it in your hand, special summon a White Forest or Azamina monster from your hand, so you can special itself, even if it's the only card in your hand. During your main phase, you can fusion summon one Azamina fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. You can do this does come up sometimes, but the main effect you're going to be using it for, in addition to the free summon, is the last effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, so unfortunately this will not trigger itself if you fuse it off, you can add one Sinful Spoils card from your deck to your hand, and these effects are once per turn. Now, original Sinful Spoils Snake Eye is a Sinful Spoils card, which means that this card, because it can add any Sinful Spoils card from your deck to your hand, it can add, it can add the, Deception of the Sinful Spoils, it can add Wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils, it can add the Sinful Spoils of Subversion Snake Eye, and most importantly for bridging your engines is the original Sinful Spoils Snake Eye. So this card is very important. I have seen a lot of lists that are playing one or two, and you would be going closer to a 40 card deck list if you did cut these down a little bit, but that doesn't actually make your deck more consistent because this is basically a consistency card. The only requirement is that you have something to fuse with, which means access to one of your tuners, which is almost every single hand that you draw. So this is my rough take on the deck so far. Because I'm a little bit over 40, I wanted to play a little bit more than 10 power spells as a ratio. So here we have the Subversion, which is the one I'm iffy on, the Talents, then we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 power spells, 11, 12, 13 if we count the Droll, and Called By you can't really count, but I feel like this card is pretty good right now. So the reason that I'm iffy on this is because this is the only card of the non-engine that is not useful either side of the dice roll. If you draw this going first, it doesn't do anything. It's just a discard that doesn't get you anything. But it is searchable off of almost anything. And as you'll see in some of the combos or the gameplay that I'm going to show, it does feel nice to have one last card that your Poplar can search as it goes into rotation and you keep summoning it back. So last things that I'll mention here is with these engines, your extra deck space is a little bit tight. Luckily, the Zelantis package is small. You have to play Masquerena because of the Flamberge line. Usually you're going to go into Little Knight. It would be nice if you had space for Underworld Goddess, because that's how you out towers. Otherwise, you may just lose to towers monsters. I don't know what I would take out for that. I guess you would have to think about taking out the Raging Phoenix package, which I don't recommend, or the Chaos Angel. But this does come up quite often because you're often making Murcielago almost every turn, and it's very easy to go into a Light and Dark Chaos Angel. The Zelantis package is the reason that I feel comfortable playing Caesar over Desiree. So Desiree would probably be better in a breaker format, but we don't appear to be in a breaker format. So the main utility in the deck is turning off your princess so you unfirelock yourself. But I found with this extra deck set of cards that it's not a problem because you turn princess and one body into Raging Phoenix, and that's how your princess is live in the grave, either through the Raging Phoenix or from the Flamberge. So I didn't really feel like it was necessary to do the lines where like you would Desiree turn off your princess so that you could make Rabbit and stuff like that, or Closed Heaven. And then lastly, I've chosen to make Caesar instead because I feel like the card is more generically powerful than Desiree is, and I wanted to play the smallest number of Fiendsmith cards in the main deck possible, which is just one Engraver. And that means that the Desiree line is less attractive in my opinion because you're not on the Lacrima package, which makes it a lot more attractive and gives you better resource economy. But I feel like there's not enough space without moving this closer to a pile. And you really don't need to draw the Fiendsmith cards. You always want to go into it through Closed Heaven. Even just having access to an Engraver in hand, I feel like wouldn't even be like that much of a benefit to the deck. The last thing that I'll mention is the cool thing about having multiple engines with these extra deck options is it's not like you're just building a board that can be hit by like one nib or something. Every single time you play with an engine, you can play with just that engine if you want and do something like making a Caesar and then start playing with your other cards. So I feel like these engines kind of insulate each other against interruptions, and it feels good to have more gas, different types of gas, and different types of insulation. I'm not going to cover the side deck because this is really just for testing purposes here. Let me show you some of the gameplay. So I have 4 games that I'm going to run through quickly. I'm going to start with the worst of all of them. Unfortunately, this was the Ryzeal game. I wanted to show off more Ryzeal gameplay, but the opponent makes some mistakes here, and that makes the game kind of less interesting. But the reason I'm showing it is just to show you the reason that I've chosen some of the power spells that I have chosen. I made a previous video talking about deck building around Ryzeal, and why you would want to choose certain spells over others, and this kind of shows that off. So here we draw a call by for turn, and I believe that this is where the opponent makes a mistake. So in the draw phase, if we look at the board here, we have a Ryzeal Cross. So the impact of this card is once per turn when an opponent's activated monster effect resolves, you can detach one material from a Ryzeal XYZ monster you control. That does mean it has to be face up, and if you do, negate that effect. Now, just because I saw a comment on this on one of my videos before, this happens in resolution, so this happens in the chain. This is not an activated effect. There's no colon, there's no semicolon. So this can be kind of hard to interact with because your opponent can choose when to do it during the resolution of effects in a chain. But he has to have a face-up Ryzeal XYZ monster to be able to detach a material, which means if you eclipse his field and he doesn't have a way to play around the eclipse, then he can't use the field spell. So the problem right here is that he is activating plugin in my draw phase. So this is the card that targets an XYZ or Ryzeal monster in your grave or banishment. Special summon it, then you can attach a Ryzeal card from your deck to a rank 4 XYZ monster you control as material, and then you can't attack for the rest of the turn except with rank 4 XYZ monsters. So I don't know why he's doing this right now, because for example, let's say I go main phase because I have thrust, right? So if I want to search talents, I want the talents to be live. So if I go main phase and I activate the Eclipse here, he can chain Detonator to the Eclipse, pop itself, and then whenever he feels like, he can plug in and bring back out the Detonator, and the Detonator will have multiple pops. But instead, he uses the plugin and he brings out the Duo Drive, and then he attaches. So now I use my 1 Eclipse, and here I activate my thrust. I'm really searching for engine here, but he's at this point, you know, unless he has hand traps, he's lost. Now, in a typical Ryzeal hand, these will both be hand traps, and he may still win if he stops me from playing, and then he can just play on his turn. But regardless, this is still a mistake because it's an unnecessary use of plugin, I think. So yeah, then here I activate the Tails because he does control a monster, and he can't use the field spell because his monsters are face down, so he can't detach from them, and I win. Okay, so that was the Ryzeal game. Now I will show against Branded. So here I activate Deception. I start with the Witch here, and I was going to search Deception off the Witch, so there's no reason for me to lose a card off of which to search Deception if I already have it. I get the Hallowed Azamina. I go for the Murcielago. Here you always want to get access to as many of your engines as possible. So this is not the typical like Deception line in White Forest. So here, remember, so this card says it adds an Azamina or Sinful Spoils card. So this does more than Azamina LZ does, but Azamina LZ is a main deck card that is like very easy to access. So it's great to have this type of functional redundancy. So here we add a Sinful Spoils card, which is the OG, and that brings us out the Ash, which can search us the Poplar. The Poplar can bring itself out, and we are playing the field spell because we are playing like a substantial Snake Eyes engine just with only 1 Oak. So that allows us to place the Snake Eyes Diabellstar. If you want to have Oak in rotation, you will typically send the Snake Eyes Diabell with the Ash, because when you bring the Oak out, the Oak can bring back the Ash, and then it can send itself in Poplar, and Poplar gets back the Snake Eyes Diabell. So you haven't actually lost anything by sending the Snake Eyes Diabell initially, unless they have held Ash for the Oak. It is a little bit risky to hold Ash for the Oak because your opponent could actually just be bringing out Flamberge immediately, either because they want to play around Nib or because they're playing a smaller engine and they're not even on the Oak. So, I don't know if it's correct to, if you have Ash, to hold it for the first or second one, but I'm just letting you know that there are different ways that this line could play out. So, now I use the Snake Eyes Diabellstar, and typically I place the Oak because normally the end board for the Snake Eyes stuff is that you have the Masquerena here, and you also have an Oak. And the reason for that is you have two push-ups. You have the Flamberge and you have the Temple. So you could push up the Masquerena and go for your Little Knight play, or Goddess if you're playing Goddess. And then the other one can bring out your Oak, and that will bring something else out, and that's how you float through your resource game. That's also why it is very helpful to play a second Oak, because if Oak, for example, brings out the Ash can add the second Oak from your deck to your hand, and now you have a lot more follow-up on your next turn. Anyhow, here you can go into the Princess, which will trigger the Flamberge, and the Princess will bring out the Flamberge, which can now place the IP Masquerena. So at this point, you're now in a position where you have only used really one of your engines plus Murcielago. So what you can see in my hand right here, this is full White Forest combo regardless. But now we have the Flamberge play with Masquerena, we have follow-up with Oak and the Temple, we have bodies if we want to link off, and we have multiple fires, so we have different options for the Princess, so it's not like one spot removal can stop us from accessing Princess. Okay, so here I'm going to use the LZ, and I actually decide to send the Oak here. I think that the thought process is, in case something happens where they stop the Temple or the Flamberge, I will always have a way to bring out the Masquerena, and so I'm opting to give up this follow-up because I think I have a lot of engine. So here I summon the Stellar, and I use the effect. I send the Hallowed Azamina, and I bring out the Sylvie. Was this a mistake? I think it's okay, because I've already established a board, and I feel like at this point, if I've used the Flamberge, if he had Nib, he maybe would have nibbed at this point. Or he may not have. He may have been waiting for me to go like end of main. So here we are Ciela. We reset the Unleashing. This is the bounce, and we bring back the Esteller. So we're not playing any of the toy cards. There's no space for them, but this does mean that the Esteller is going to be able to trigger its effect more often than not, because if you send a toy card, this doesn't work because it does check on resolution if it was a spell or trap card that was sent to the grave, whereas the toy cards are monsters. So here the Diabel will give us back the Hallowed Azamina. Is this a mistake here, or... See, we can't use the original Grave effect, and the Deception is going to reset itself in the end phase, and this is follow-up next turn, so I guess it does probably make most sense to add back Hallowed here. So here I can start going for this line. Now the downside of doing this in the order that I did it is if you don't go for the Caesar first, I feel like you are playing into Nib to some degree, unless you hold the Flamberge. If you hold the Flamberge the whole time, so if they nib you, it's going to float into two bodies, that still allows you to do the entire Closed Heaven line. So... you know, I guess maybe you could argue that, like, another way of playing this deck, and this is what's cool about the flexibility, is actually I should have started with the White Forest stuff just to go into Closed Heaven. Or do some, like, if I had, like, a really good hand, I could go into Diabel and then also go into Closed Heaven and not even have used my Snake Eyes engine yet. Maybe I would just have access to Murcielago searching the original, and then that would get me into the Snake Eyes stuff after. And, you know, they'd have to interact with me at by that point. So... end phase, that resets itself. We have the Princess in Grave. We do have a mat for the Sylvie in the Arciela. There's some stuff that can add itself back, like the Elzette and the Esteller, so don't forget about those. And yeah, Princess is live, so we also have Unleashing. So we have a pretty diversified set of locations for our interactions besides our hand. We don't have any hand traps in our hand because we're not playing any besides Droll. Now here he activates Albion, and so now I'm thinking, well, if he's on Branded, that means he's on Power Spell, and I don't want to lose to, like, Talents take Caesar, or I don't want to make the game harder for myself by something like that. Or if worse, if he's drawn, like, two really good Power Spells, like maybe he has, like, a Talents to take and a Droplet, you know? So I want to save my interactions for when I absolutely have to, and I know that Caesar is kind of my key to victory in beating his key cards. So he gets the Branded Fusion, and I'm like, okay, well, if he does have Talent or Droplet or whatever, there's no way that I can't, you know, allow the Branded Fusion to resolve. So I just have to negate that. He's playing a Tearlaments version, so he changed the Havness here. I do bring out the Masquerena. He gets a Rhino Heart in rotation, and he adds back Branded in red. So at this point, what I do is I want to get the Rhino Heart off the field, because if this was brought out off its own effect, it will be banished when it leaves the field. But I also don't want him to be able to go into something like a Kaleido Heart through, I mean, he can't if this is banished, but I don't want him to go into, like, stuff with his Tear engine. So I want to banish, like, another name and then clear the Rhino Heart off board. The the Rhino Heart and the Havness are banished here. He's already used Retribution, so he's not looking super great. And now it doesn't matter that he's dumped the Shaylin because there's no way that he can get to the Kaleido Heart. So at this point, he's obviously going to use the Lubellion effect. I'm using my triggers and I can chain the Unleashing because I'm like, okay, you've used the fusion effect. I might not be able to stop you fusing, but I can stop you going into something that uses a fusion monster, maybe. So let me see if I can bounce that and see what happens. So that goes back to the extra deck. And here he brings out... So actually, because of the way that this was chained, because of the Shaylin, he gets to the Dragon's Depelia anyhow because he made the Masquerade, and that was the fusion material to go into the Dragon's Depelia. So... that's how that resolves. So then he goes Dragon's Depelia to target the Caesar, which is fine, because the thing is that this only negates while it is on field. So it places a Predator counter on it, which stays. But then the other effect that negates is negate the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that have Predator counters. So it doesn't matter if it has a counter if this is not on the field, and this doesn't become level 1 because it doesn't have a level, it's a rank. So as long as I Little Knight and remove that, actually my Caesar is still in rotation. And so he knows that that's going to happen when this resolves, so I don't know, he's just like throwing out his last-ditch effort in Branded in red, but this hasn't resolved yet, so I actually can still use the Caesar and I can negate the Branded in red. So... I mean, at this point, he might as well scoop, but I'm just showing you here like how much stuff you have in rotation when you're playing the engines correctly. Like you cycle through so many different resources. So here I can use the Little Knight again. This really doesn't matter. There's so many different ways of playing around this. I also have the Subversion, which remember when you cycle through Poplar in your opponent's turn, you do get another search if you have a target in deck. And unless you want to play another original Sinful Spoils, which you could play, but it might be a little bit awkward if you don't have face-up cards you want to send. So this really helps on the crackback. And because this deck is all about managing your resources, the crackback is important. So I do think that like playing some stuff for the crackback is a good idea. Yeah, so at this point I'm just like, okay, well I have a million different ways to OTK. I'm just going to put like some bodies on the board. It doesn't really matter that much what I do at this point. And then eventually he does surrender. Okay, so now I have a third game against Floo, and I think that I play this horribly, actually. I haven't played against Floo in so long. So here we start with the Snake Eye Ash Searching Poplar, which gives us a Temple, and the Snake Eye is the Bellstar, where we bring out the Oak, and the Oak brings that out, and now we get to Flamberge. So at this point, this suggests to me very heavily that the opponent at least does not have Ash. It also suggests, if you start with like normal summon Ash, that they don't have an Imperm either, and probably not a Veiler. Because usually against most of the Snake Eye stuff, even though this may sound like kind of cringe and low skill, it often is a good idea to actually hit the first thing that you see, which is the exact opposite with Ryzeal, where you typically want to save everything for the Duo Drive. So I'm thinking that he probably doesn't have any hand traps at this point, and I can play however I want. So I bring out the Flamberge, I place the Masquerena, I bring back out the Snake Eyes Diabellstar. This is like exclusively just for linking. I'm not playing any rank 8s. I don't think that it's worth it. You can make it with the Flamberge and the Diabellstar, or even like a Diabell, but I don't think that you'd just be losing too much. Like these cards are very good for what they offer. And you might be wondering, like, why play Snake Eyes Diabellstar in this type of deck? Like, isn't it an additional brick? It is an additional brick, and you actually don't have to play it, but your ceiling goes up so dramatically by placing this off of Temple that there are actually many lines where you're missing just a single body. For example, to go into Closed Heaven. Right now, if I had no White Force cards, or maybe I started with these and they both got hand trapped, I could go into Closed Heaven right now for free, and I could have a Wave Hiking Caesar on my board, just because of these two bodies. This actually does happen quite a lot, so I feel like, it might be worth playing just for that reason alone. Anyhow, here, because I have Deception access, I go for the Murcielago, and because I already started with the Snake Eyes stuff, this is the really cool thing about this card and what I call functional redundancy. You don't have to search the original Sinful Spoils from this card to use your Snake Eyes line. You already use your Snake Eyes line, so you wouldn't be searching that. But instead, this can also add an Azamina card. And this card is not only an Azamina card, it is always a White Forest card. So your White Forest searchers, like Sylvie or Arciela, can always search Azamina Unleashing, but so can the Murcielago. So because these have so many different purposes, it usually adds to your end board and doesn't clog you on stuff that you've already used, just because they're so flexible. So that's one of the reasons why I like this off of Woes, probably the main reason. Anyhow, now I have two bodies I can go into Closed Heaven, so I go for the Lion, I equip the Requiem, which can bring out the Necroquip, and then yeah, I go into the Wave Hiking Caesar. At this point, I summon the Azamina LZ and the Rusia. I get a draw off of this because it's free. There's no reason not to. I draw into another Rusia. It doesn't matter. It's not like I'm playing hand traps I'm looking to draw into. I just want to have a good resource economy. Now I go into the Arciela and I send the Azamina Unleashing. I search for a Wanted, and the Unleashing can reset itself. So I have like a really good field and a really good hand at this moment. Now, because again, I don't want to like say the word functional redundancy a million times and it sounds redundant to you guys, but your cards being able to search the same thing is actually good in this deck. It's not bad. You're not clogging on stuff. The fact that I can search a Wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils off of the Azamina LZ, even though I've already resolved the Arciela and I've already resolved the Murcielago, is not bad. Now I still have a material to continue playing so I can make the Omni Negate. So I can chain the Wanted here, I can get a Witch for free, I can go into Ilia Sylvia, and now I haven't even used the draw. So at this point, actually, I think that I might have played this wrong. I think I skipped past this a little too fast to go over it, but I think I played this incorrectly, and there was a way to maybe have gotten a Stellar instead. I don't remember, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But anyhow, I just wanted to make Diabel, and so that's why I summoned the LZ here, and the Diabel adds me back the Subversion. Again, this is one of those cards that is very useful on the crackback, and as you can see, if you have a board with stuff like these, which are your main insulations that often won't last back into your turn, like these are not crackback cards, these are just end board cards, but the Raging Phoenix with the Princess in the grave, the Flamberge, the Diabel, the tuners that can get themselves back into rotation, these are your crackback resource game cards. So having cards like this that help you with the crackback are very good. This is what the game plan is supposed to look like in a typical, you know, like uninterrupted game state. I also would like to show you where I get interrupted a bunch with hand traps, but I feel like I just didn't have time to wait long enough for people to play those types of games against me. So anyhow, he starts with Dark Ruler. So Caesar's gone, Ilia Sylvia is gone. These are kind of like the most powerful interruptions on my board immediately. Now, what does this mean immediately? First of all, the Princess is still live, okay, because we have a fire on board. The Flamberge will float, and using the Oak as material for like a draw or whatever for a White Forest card is fine under Dark Ruler because we still have a Temple that can push up the Masquerena. So, you know, you're expecting that at this point you have Unleashing, okay, which is... So Fiend Illusion and Spellcaster, Fusion, and Synchros, right? So here we have an Illusion here, we have an Illusion here that's 2, we have a Spellcaster here that's 3. So we have 3 potential bounces based on what's on our field right now. So we have Unleashing to bounce 3, we have Princess to pop 1, we have Flamberge to float 2, and then we have a lot of follow-up, and then we have Crackback. So we're not looking too bad under Dark Ruler, but then he activates Map, which is cringe as hell. And that means that we actually don't have Princess live, because if you read Princess, this card says, where is it? If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, and he's never special summoning. So the Princess is basically dead. The Flamberge may not float. We're looking at just a bounce and also a Masquerena here. Now, the reason why I think I played this game poorly is because I feel like on activation... Actually, see, if I use the Unleashing here, I'm only going to get 1 bounce. So during your main phase, you can reveal 1, blah, 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 in your hand. Wait, I'm looking for the... you can only use each effect of Fluandereeze and Magnificent Map once per turn. So if I wait until he actually goes to use the effect and I bounce it, even though he can activate it again, he can't use the effect again. But this gets really hard punished by, like, if he has access to Map again, like if he drew a second one or a Terraforming or whatever. So I feel like... I'm not going to bounce it, and I'm going to wait till he summons a bunch, and then I'm going to bounce them. But you always have to remember when you play against this cringe deck that if you're going to use any Link Monster effect, it has to be before M-Pen hits the field, so it's always going to be, you know, not, like, convenient. So anyhow, I Unleashing, and I bounce the map and 2 monsters, because I'm thinking, like, It'll be a lot harder for him to go through his resource game if I bounce 3 and he has to restart the summoning process again and I banish 1 of those. But I think that this is the part that maybe I just wasn't sure what to do here, because this felt like a super inefficient play and not like the best use of Unleashing. Maybe I should have waited for the M-Pen, allow him to attack and whatever, and then in the end phase, maybe I should have bounced the M-Pen, whatever other monster, and also his Dreaming Town if I knew what it was. So yeah, maybe I should have just allowed him to do everything. potentially bring out an SP, banish whatever, that doesn't matter. Use the other effect, banish, banish, so he has 2 cards less in rotation for tribute summoning something, and maybe he just ends on like an M-Pen Dreaming Talent. Maybe that's what I should have done instead. So yeah, anyhow, he takes the Raging Phoenix. I don't know if he's taking this because of Princess, but Princess isn't live anyhow, so I actually don't know why he talents to take there. So here he activates the Harpy's Featherstorm, and he has the Dreaming Talent there. He goes Battle Phase. He destroys the Caesar, which I don't know why he did that. I think that was a misplay on his part. He should have destroyed the Ilya Sylvia, because the Caesar will never do anything, because he will never special summon. So now we go around to my turn, and he activates the Featherstorm, and I don't know what happened here. I don't know how this was allowed to happen. Like, the thing is, okay, so M-Pen stops me from activating my Ilya Sylvia and my Little Knight, so I actually can't negate the Featherstorm, if you're wondering why. So the Featherstorm resolves, and that means that I can activate monster effects, but they're all negated. So it's like, there's no reason for me to activate anything. But I have talents, I have Subversion, so this is the perfect example of, like, you know, your opponent's trying to break your board, right? And because you have so much, like, resource economy, you're floating your stuff, you're keeping stuff in grave, you have stuff in rotation, and you're preparing for the crackback, okay? So we Subversion, push back, okay, because that's another body that I can potentially take with a Flamberge if the game goes later or whatever. And I also have talents, so what I want is for him to have only one monster, like to bring out another M-Pen, and I can talents take the M-Pen, for example. Because he's summoning here, I'm going to take this opportunity to give myself the M-Pen for an extra body, because I can always clear my field whenever I want. So here he searches another M-Pen, and he summons that M-Pen. I guess the one upside of me playing in the super inefficient way that I played before is it's not like he has M-Pen and then he's cycling the, I forget what it's called, the Wind Monarch card that, like, bounces stuff. So anyhow, he Strees here, he banishes my Poplar. At this point, I've already used all my Poplar searches. The Princess was never live, so I think he's actually banishing the wrong cards. He should have probably banished other stuff, maybe like a Diabelle, maybe an Oak. Like, I don't know, I feel like there are better options for what to banish here. So now I flip my monsters face up. He still has an M-Pen, okay? And I'm just trying to get stuff off my field so that I can talents to take. And so I talents to take, so now that the M-Pen is gone, I'm no longer locked. And here I just attack, and go for game. So the last one that I'll show is against Hero, and I know a lot of you guys might be thinking, like, why are you showing, you know, against all these trash decks? Bro, listen, I tried. I got a match against Ryzeal. The guy did nonsense, and the game ended immediately. Okay, I'm just, I don't want to wait like a week to get the gameplay to show this off when I can't even play ranked, you know what I mean? So anyhow, here I get the Murcielago. We search the Unleashing. Again, it just shows that this functional redundancy is great. I already have Original. That's fine. There's other stuff that's useful that I can search. I Original Send it, which is fine, because this being engraved means there's something to add back off of the Hallowed Azamina. Or sorry, to get back the Hallowed Azamina. Here we get the Poplar. The Poplar then summons itself out, and we get the Temple. So Temple can place the Snake Eyes Diabelle as usual. We send that to get the Oak, which brings us the Ash. Here we can bring out the Flamberge. Snake Eyes Diabelle places itself. We give ourselves back the Hallowed Azamina. Unfortunately, like, it would be nice if this could also tribute Azamina cards, because then we could use Azamina Unleashing as fodder, and that would be more searchable gas, or like more searchable fodder, I guess, but you know, it's still fine. Here we go into Princess, we bring back the Flamberge, we place the Masquerena, and this is the standard Snake Eye kind of M board that you have, plus a Diabelle. I would say this is a very realistic and typical board, even through some interruptions. As you can see, you know, like, well, we drew the one of Engraver. In our typical hand, this would either be a power spell, or it would be another piece of engine. Here we get another body. We bring out the Rusia, so we shuffle back the Arciela, and we just need another body. We don't want to use our Flamberge. We want to keep this in our opponent's turn, because we already used the effect, so that if our Weather Temple fails or Flamberge fails, we always have a way to bring out the Masquerena. And if they don't stop either of them, and we're keeping the Oak, then we have a way to get out both, and we look even better. So now we go into the Requiem, the Engraver, we equip for the Necroquip, and then that gives us Engraver again, and we go for the Wave Viking Caesar. We reset the Deception in the end phase. So here, you could argue for playing Debtors, and the reason for that is that before end phase, we didn't have anything else to tribute for Hallowed Azamina to bring out like an Ilia Sylvia. But if we were playing Debtors, then on their turn, when we set the Debtors, we could use the set Deception, which would not reset itself because it has to be face up when it goes to the grave to reset itself in the end phase. But we could Debtors, and we could either Ilia Sylvia, or we could bring out Sol, which is the one that gives you a send, and then it adds back in the standby phase. Now, in our version of the deck, I feel like there's not enough space for Sol, but you could hold the Debtors. You don't just shotgun it, because you could play around breakers if you needed to, and then you could bring out the Ilia Sylvia whenever you want, or you could shotgun it depending on like whatever you're worried about. Anyhow, so this is like a pretty normal looking end board. In terms of crackback stuff, you really just have the Hallowed Azamina with some fodder here, and then the typical stuff that floats. So, okay, now opponent's turn. They search for Liquid Soldier, and I'm like, okay, well, if he's playing heroes, I'm probably gonna win, but I also don't really know what his cards do super well. So here I bring out the Masquerena. I use the Flamberge so I can get all my stuff in rotation. So the Oak summons the Poplar, and on the new chain we get the Subversion. So again, I'm just pointing this out to show you that if you have additional cards like these that are searchable by so many different things that are super flex, it actually does help. It's not redundant. And on the crackback, it matters that you have these cards. Okay, so now he polys, and there's no reason not to use Wave Viking Caesar. He has 3 cards left in hand, so if he has another way to poly, the Caesar answers that. And then if he has 2 more cards, I still have, you know, like the Diabel and the Unleashing. So I feel like I'm like fine enough. And then so he surrenders here. Okay, so my final or my current thoughts on this deck is, I think that this could be a very, very strong deck in Supreme Darkness format, because the only thing that we're waiting on is the Azamina LZ. This is pending a ban list, because Supreme Darkness is probably going to be ban list season, or right after ban list season, who knows. If they ruin the fire decks, we can't do this. Like, if they were to neuter the deck entirely by banning Flamberge, we can't do this. But even if they did, like, you know, they put Oak to 1, they put, who knows, dude, if it's Konami, they could put Temple to 1. Honestly, Konami could do that. They could put Original to 1. If they hit the Wanted engine, the deck would be less consistent, but as long as they don't ban either of these cards, the Wanted or the Witch, that's fine, because we can search so much of our deck with each other. So I think this is probably still going to be a useful deck next format, but it does lose to Droll, it does lose to Shifter, and it does lose to the Charmies. So there you have it. Thanks for watching.